And at 9 o'clock, happy to be welcoming back our good friend Sam McKewon of the Omaha World Herald. Sam, good morning to you. Prime time, Nebraska, Colorado. It just feels right, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, apparently never happened before. So yeah, it feels good. Well, there's been a couple night games in the history
right
at Folsom Field. And actually one of the more famous ones in 91 was at night, the snowball game. But yeah, I mean, I think it'll be fun, and Nebraska could use a ruckus crowd. Last year their largest home game was Michigan, and it was like 100 degrees.
Yep.
And so fans were just baked. And of course, Michigan got off to a fast start and the fans weren't in it. So, to have a night game and to have an opportunity to get loud and rowdy will be a lot of fun. And, Deion's son said a few things last year that will probably come back up again this year. And so it should be a ruckus atmosphere. Maybe the hardest home game that Deion Sanders and his crew have had up to this point.
All right, weigh in on the poll question for us, Sam. Nebraska fans hate more, Iowa or Colorado?
Probably depends on where you live in the state. And so, I think there's probably some Nebraska fans who live in Omaha who are just in great proximity or persistent proximity to Iowa and probably get tired of the series there. Historically, fans who have gone to Folsom Field a lot will just tell you that, they haven't been treated very well there. But I don't know that Nebraska will ever play Colorado again in a regular season game after this year. So, it's one of those deals. Although who knows? 5 years from now we might be in a completely different configuration of college football. And so, I probably at this moment, Iowa, but most people who listen to your show will say Colorado, if that makes sense. Like there's just people are more vociferous about Colorado, and people are more vociferous about Missouri, and they haven't played Missouri since 2010. There's just some ingrained things there that go back a long way. But no, I mean, I think Iowa is the team that probably gets Nebraska's goat at this point for sure.
Sam, the conversation, and we've seen a couple of different win totals for Nebraska. Circa comes out yesterday with their early season totals, and no change with what we saw before, 7.5 for Nebraska. And it seems that will lead into the question of the ceiling and the floor for Nebraska. I've said I don't even want to talk about the ceiling for Nebraska until you can establish the floor. And that's what I'm most intrigued about in year two is where that floor seems to be. And I'll give Gary credit too. He's brought up the way that they not only try to develop the top half of the roster, but more importantly, the bottom half of the roster. So if you're looking at a tangible goal for Nebraska and under Matt Rule in these next couple of years, is it more important to establish that floor, and what, in your opinion, what that floor should realistically be for Nebraska here in the next few years?
Sure. Yeah, I think you have to establish a baseline competency that you're not dipping below. So whatever that looks like, you've got to get to a point where the expectation level isn't to be on a roller coaster and win 10 one year and then 5 the next, but to have a baseline expectation. Once you're able to set that, then you can go after the ceiling. And I think the ceiling is important too. I think that it matters whether Nebraska is able to get beyond 9 wins. If you want to have an 11-win season in there, because I think this is a program where if you can get one of those, it's going to exponentially improve the team. Like there's other programs that can kind of go up and down, and the fan base is there, but they're sort of lukewarm anyway for whatever reason. But if Nebraska is able to win, 10 games a couple of years in a row, the energy around the program and the money around the program will be pretty significant. So floor first, but ceiling matters.
Speaking of money around the program, we've heard a lot of noise over the past week and a half about the proposed settlement for the NCAA in this House v. NCAA antitrust suit. The word on the street is a $2.7 billion damages settlement and a proposal to have sort of a salary cap of what schools can share as far as revenue with athletes, which essentially ushers in the pay for play fully. Do you have a take on this? What do you think this means for the future of college athletics?
Well, I know they're trying to get to a point where they can create some sort of cap or ceiling, and then NIL can supplement it beyond that. So the NCAA is trying to get to a point of trying to get to a point where when they get in front of a judge who probably is paying virtually no attention to the law, looks at it and says, "Yeah, that seems reasonable." That's all we're trying to do at this point. There's virtually no legal interpretation going on here. This is all sort of policy making as we go. And you could argue that the NCAA created a sort of collusive atmosphere that artificially depressed the compensation to student athletes, but we have virtually no proof that student athletes even tried to create their own model, which they could have done with any number of universities, or that there's any particular evidence that had we gone to that model, however many years ago, it would have been sustainable. So this isn't about the law. This is about, let's create a number that doesn't upset judges, or if the thing gets all the way up to the Supreme Court, they're like, that seems okay. That's all we're doing at this point. And so they're trying to figure out a number that will sort of keep judges at bay. And on the flip side of the coin, you're going to have people pushing in the other direction. And I don't mean to be cynical about it, but that's kind of where we've been all along on this topic. There's no, the NCAA has always been a voluntary organization. So the idea that student athletes couldn't go out and make their own money is not true. They could have done that. They didn't do it. The professional leagues have done a pretty good job of collectively bargaining with their union to keep out athletes to the NFL, which is an intriguing thing all its own. And I wonder why student athletes haven't gone after that. But there's systems in place, and so now what you're looking at is you've got to try to find a system that judges are okay with, and then the NCAA can go to Congress and say, "Hey, we've done something, right? We've done something here. Is this enough for you to pass an antitrust law so that we don't have to deal with this anymore, and we can just say that we're good?" And that's the two fronts. Is you have to try to convince Congress, and then you have to try to convince the legal system that you're doing something reasonable. And to be clear, I think the NCAA could have handled this a lot better 20 years ago, for sure. And maybe that's how legal reasoning comes into play. But at the end of the day, that's all they're trying to do. And so let's get to 20 million, and maybe that'll be enough. And then the boosters won't have to try to buy the kids because the boosters will be tired of giving their own money. And I'm like, maybe I don't know. I mean, the stratification that we have in terms of financially in society right now. There's people at the top with so much money, they don't know what to do with it. So they may as well give it to a college student athlete. So there's no guarantee that 20 million is going to keep the donors out of the NIL game. Chances are good that there's people out there with. No, well, I agree. But there are people that are going to be like, listen, I'm tired of giving you money. Why should I have to give you money to pay these kids? It's my money. It's not like it's the university's money. The university's not giving the money to the donor to launder and then get back. I mean, that's not what's happening.
Yet.
So it's like the donor's like, it's my money. I'm tired of giving you my money. There will be people who do that. But then there are people who have so much money that they don't have anything else to do with it except do what they're already doing with it. And, so there'll be donors who do that. I mean, the guy that guaranteed Mel Tucker's contract, which, as it turns out, probably won't be paid out. But that guy was basically like, look, I mean, he has $90 million sitting around to guarantee, a $93 million contract. Those kind of things like that. That stuff's not going to go away. There are some donors that are going to be like, yeah, I'm out. I don't really want to pay these kids the money. You pay them the money. And so that situation will resolve itself, and we'll see where we are in 2 to 3 years. The question I have about the $20 million now is the revenue sharing, how they're going to get around Title IX. I don't know how they're going to do that. There seems to be some sort of magical thinking. And as I said before, it's very possible that we're in a what do you want to call it? A state of such capriciousness that like somebody will be just like, yeah, that's fine, irrespective of what the law says, because that's kind of where we're at now. Like I would say, you can't get around Title IX, nor should you be able to get around Title IX. And
Agreed.
It may come to the point where it's like there's just a group of legal thinkers and Congress is like, yeah, it's fine, let's just do this, and it won't. But that's kind of the world we live in right now. Like we're just, I've said this too, like how are you going to tell NCAA student athletes that they can't stay in college for as long as they want? So you're going to tell a kid like Cameron Meyer, who's a pitcher at UNO, and she doesn't know I'm saying this, but she could be at UNO pitching for 10 years. She could transfer to Texas or UCLA or Nebraska or wherever she wants to go and continue to be a pitcher. And you're going to tell her or some other athlete, listen, we know you don't have any professional opportunities outside of the university structure that are nearly as good as the university structure, but we have to arbitrarily end your time, even though you're an employee, with the university at 4 years. I mean, that makes no sense. It doesn't. Like, it doesn't make any sense that you would cap their eligibility, especially when there's no other industry on the planet where you cap their eligibility at 5 years. But guess what? Somebody will just say, yeah, we're going to do it that way, because that's the environment we live in. Like, I would like to see a student athlete say, you can't make me leave. You can't. There's no law that says I got to leave after 4 years. I want to stay for 10, and I want to play for 4 different universities. It's an unlimited transfer portal. It's NIL. I don't want to have to leave, and I'd like to see a court say they have to.
Yeah.
And that moment's probably going to come.
The postdoctorate
I don't know what the courts are going to do. What are they going to do?
Yeah. Sam McKewon joining us.
I get it's a rant. I get it.
No, it's
but like
those are good thoughts.
That's the environment we live in.
Yeah.
Like we live in an environment where the courts don't. It's total capricious. And the day when somebody challenges the eligibility limits, everybody's going to look around. All the national reporters at ESPN or whatever, like, I don't know about that. I'm not sure they should be able to do that. Or, Tom Mars will be like, I don't know about that. Because everybody's flying without, a net here. And nobody really knows. I mean, law's kind of been thrown out the window. And Sean Patton said it last week. The NCAA is just throwing up trial balloons. The thing with the walk-ons and the 85. These are just trial balloons that they're trying out in the media.
Mm-hmm.
They have no idea what's going to work and what's not going to work. Everybody's just, throwing stuff at the wall and hoping to see what sticks.
Yeah, it's those are all fantastic points. We're talking to Sam McKewon of the Omaha World Herald. Sam, back to the roster for Nebraska, and it was a development that I think we knew it was trending in favor of Nebraska with the commitment of 4-star quarterback TJ Lateef. I'm fascinated by this young man. I was just watching his film. There's a throwing style that it's hard not to get excited. Strong arm, just kind of a slinger, if you will. I'm curious, when you look at that quarterback room with the addition of your 25 guy, and that's a 4-star guy, with what you have in there, mainly with what we know Dylan Raiola possesses, Danny Kaelin, how do you view that quarterback room? And maybe more importantly, not just the development of TJ Lateef when he eventually gets to Nebraska, but also what that does to development of the guys that are currently in there, mainly Dylan Raiola and even a Danny Kaelin.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think their goal is obviously to push everybody who's in the room, and you want to do that at every position. I think Lateef is a good player. Yeah, I mean, he can throw the football. He has limited statistics because of his injury last year, but certainly what you see on tape is really nice. Good anticipatory, skills. Understands when to throw, tough throws, box fades, stuff like that. Has a nice release. He'll definitely push the guys that are already in the room and try to do that in a way that, you want to put a little space between Raiola and the next guy and maybe the next guy. So there's an opportunity here to redshirt. You hope that quarterbacks understand that. Like, it's most top shelf quarterbacks redshirt. Dylan Raiola is not going to do it, but a lot of them do. Mm-hmm. And so, that's a logical conclusion for TJ Lateef. Hopefully he understands that and sticks around for 3 years to see if he's going to be the guy. If he thinks he's going to come here and go, well, I mean, if I'm not going to be the starter as a true freshman, then maybe I shouldn't stay. I think that would be unfortunate. I will say this: Nebraska sometimes has to deal with that.
Yep.
Because Nebraska is in the middle of the country, and it's not in a quote unquote cool place, or whatever. So sometimes Nebraska has to deal with that. But let me say this too: that with that new football building and all the stuff they put around these student athletes, I think that most freshmen who come here are willing to stay for 2 years to see how it goes, because the setup here is so sweet. And so Nebraska's new building and the way that the coaching staff is probably buys them a little bit more time than they may have even under the frost there.
Sam, before I let you go, and Evan did a good job of laying out some of those scenarios for Nebraska baseball in trying to claim a regular season title. You feel like they're in a good spot to do that? And just what has been your feeling of this baseball team as we get into the Big Ten tournament starting next week?
They have a great chance to, win the Big Ten title. They have to sweep, I think, in order to pull it off. Because I think Illinois will probably take 2 from Purdue.
Yeah, I would agree.
But if they sweep Michigan State, then they'll share for it and they'll get the number 1 seed. And Nick, you know this team well too. So here's the thing: they obviously have a lot of components. They've really struggled to find a third starter. Yeah. They've settled now on a guy that had a no-hitter a couple of weeks ago. He was struggling just 3 weeks ago. I think what you hope, if you're a Nebraska fan, is that all these pitchers peak all at once. And if they all peak at once, I mean, Caleb Clark and Drew Christo and Jalen Worthley and all these guys, and Kyle Perry too, all of the guys in the bullpen, they might make some noise. They really might. They could win the Big Ten tournament, which I don't think they've ever done. And they could do some damage in the NCAA regional too. But they need to pick the pitchers to all peak at once. They're good enough on offense to do some stuff, but they need those pitchers. And who knows? You just don't know until they do or don't do it. But they certainly have the depth of arms. Now they just need those guys to be consistent.
Yep, I'm right there with you. Sam, as always, great